Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's chat. It's all about leave no trace and hiking ethics. I'm going to give everyone just a few moments to arrive. It's 5 p.m. Let me know where you're joining from. Grab a drink, get comfortable, and let's talk all about hiking ethics in the outdoors. So I'm just going to give everyone a few moments to arrive. Let me know in the chat box where you're joining from and how you're doing. Hi, Ava. So I'm probably going to give us just like another minute before we get started. Today, we're talking all about hiking ethics, leave no trace, and would love to know where you guys are chiming in from, where you are joining us from, and how you're doing. What are you guys going to be bringing to, today's chat? I'm just having water. Okay, looks like Philip is joining us from Oceanside. Nima is joining from Bakersfield. Ava is joining from Bellingham, Washington. Awesome. Yeah, it looks like Utah. Awesome. Hey, Stacy. I'm glad you guys are doing well. I'm sure I'm starting to feel a little bit stir crazy, and I'm sure you guys are as well. Hi, Heather from Ohio. Awesome. So yeah, we can get started in just a moment here. So hey, Dale from Sacramento. Thanks for letting me know. Okay. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk all about hiking ethics and practicing leave no trace. So I prepared a talk, and I would love, as we're discussing, for you to add any comments, questions. Feel free to give your 2 cents as we chat about hiking ethics. And so let's start with Leave No Trace. So Leave No Trace is a nonprofit that was founded in 1994. Their mission is to protect the outdoors by teaching and educating people to enjoy the outdoors responsibly. And as, the founder of 52 Hikes, we encourage you to get out and walk and to enjoy nature. But we also want to make sure that when you're getting out there, that you're being responsible. And sometimes it's just a lack of awareness. And so I see sometimes people post things where maybe they might be angry about people leaving trash or orange peels on the floor. And so it's just a need to actually prepare ourselves and educate ourselves as to how should we enjoy the outdoors responsibly. And then it's our jobs, once we become hikers and leaders, to actually train and teach our family and friends on how to be a steward of the outdoors. So, one of the things that Leave No Trace likes to say, or one of their missions is, when you're going to go outside, to think, when I'm out, am I maintaining the integrity of this space, right? So being mindful of that. And we're going to go through all of the different 7 principles and how each impacts being, having that integrity to the space. So, and I will be adding your comments as we go. It looks like Gustavo says he agrees, enjoy responsibly. So again, let's have the mentality of, as we learn these things, let's teach our kids, let's teach our friends of, what we learn. Here's some interesting statistics. There are more than 300 million recreators in national parks every year. And at 52, we actually have decided that we wanted to launch a lifelong commitment for people to enjoy the outdoors, and specifically our federally designated spaces. And so when we're going to these parks, a lot of times you'll find things like, long lines. And of course, there are these beautiful places, but we just need to be mindful that we are practicing and doing our parts to minimize impacts. And so, that's amazing, right? Like, a lot of people are getting outside, but now let's figure out how to give back. So being a steward, because we want to protect this for future generations. Like, that's one of the things that happens, I believe, in, people who are younger. They go out and they might, for example, damage a rock and they tag it. They don't think about the impacts that has on future generations or other people. So that's why it's our job to learn and to teach, so that they can be more mindful and think, okay, should I really be doing that? So, it's really important to, as you're getting out, to use good judgment. And, it's harder said than done. I don't think anyone intentionally goes out and tries to harm anyone or harm, these places. I really think it's just a lack of that mindfulness. And it's really something that is learned, that emotional intelligence. And so we can be the change, right? And so trying to help others to see things in a different perspective sometimes is really powerful. So Amanda says they're a heavy BSA family. So this has been drilled into them since babyhood. Thank you for bringing awareness to leave no trace. You're so welcome. Hi, Christina from Ohio. So yeah, it's so important to minimize our impact on the land. And we're going to go through some of those different ways of doing that. Preservation is also another thing, right? And we'll go through some of the ways that we can preserve. One of the things that we do at 52 with one of our challenges and the kids challenge is we actually, suggest that you go do some stewardship hikes, whether you're maintaining trails or you're cleaning up trails. Like, those are really key things. Like, once we start loving the outdoors and the trails that give us so much to be grateful for, it's our job to now help keep these trails in pristine conditions. And that means we're responsible when we're outside. So let's talk a little bit about talking about leave no trace. So first, we're going to start with these principles that are for back country versus front country. So let me define the back country first. The back country is usually when you go do something like outside of a day hike. So you're usually backpacking, through hiking, etc. So I want to let you guys know that last year, if you didn't know, I didn't really share a lot about it. I've been sharing it more in these videos. I did the John Muir Trail. So that would apply to that kind of a hike. And then there's the front country, and that's when you can easily drive up to a trailhead, you go out for the day, you come back in. So it's important to know these different the principles and how they apply to using them in the front country versus in the back country. So let's see. Christina, please pick up your dog poop. So we're actually going to talk about that. So let's talk a little bit about the backcountry leave no trace principles. First one, and we have been talking about this in all our previous videos since we started this series, and that's to make sure to plan ahead and prepare. We have talked about it in the Hiking 101 series. The first thing to be responsible is to understand, how to be out and be out safe. Because think about it, every time you go out into nature, especially in the backcountry, and let's say you're not prepared and something happens and you need to call, you need to call for assistance. Now it's not only your life at risk, but potentially the lives of, the others that are out, the field response teams, etc. And so, you have to think before you go out there. It's just super important to make sure you understand how to read a map and compass. It's important to have the 10 essentials. It's so important to really, really do your best to know what the weather is going to be. Because again, we talked about this in the last classes, that is the difference between a amazing trip or potentially a life-threatening trip, right? Because you didn't do your due diligence and letting someone know where you're going. So that's like one of the key principles. It's the number one principle. And then the second principle is this is in the backcountry, to ensure that you're traveling and camping on durable surfaces. So what does that mean? Let me explain this to you. It doesn't mean if you don't see a trail, it means you actually try not to create any new trails. There are times I will explain where you may have no choice. And that's if you're like for example, I'll tell you this example of when that doesn't apply. So the Sierra Club has a 100 peaks list, and I think there are a few of those peaks where they don't necessarily have like a state, or there's not like a specific trail. So some people go off trail. They have to go off trail to find the peak. That's the only time that there's certain ways of practicing that safely. And that's like, if you have a big group, make sure you're all dispersed, etc. But for the most part, you want to stay on trails that are already created. So you don't want to go creating new trails called social trails. And if you're going to camp, you don't want to basically camp on like a field of flowers. You want to camp where there's rock or already established campgrounds. Super important to be mindful of that. So if you see a trail here and you start going out into the grass, that's not really practicing the traveling. And the way you travel, it's going to impact the land. So being mindful of that. So, another thing, and we talked about this earlier, is disposing of waste properly. This is number 3. So dispose of waste properly. So I actually brought something that I wanted to show you guys. This is my little restroom baggie, and you guys can prepare this at home. You just need a little bag, okay? And I bring this with me on each hike, okay? Let me show you what it includes. I have a biodegradable little doggy bag, and that's where I can put my trash. And no matter what you do, if you have to go number 1 or number 2, you always pack your toilet paper out. So what I do is I'll, basically open up my trash bag, and I have in my baggie toilet paper, and I also have my little trowel. So you're supposed to, if you're going to go number 2, dig a 6-inch cat hole, 6 to 8 inches. And then when you're done, you cover it with, dirt, etc. So this is my little restroom bag. I know it's not pleasant, but listen, this is how we go outdoors responsibly. I know that also this could be like kind of weird for people to talk about, but sometimes you gotta go. So be prepared. Please don't leave trash out there. It's really, really unfortunate when I go out, and sometimes I go into a corner and you see that people have left their trash behind. And this also includes pets, right? Like, make sure that if you're bringing a dog, bring a bag like this and dump it in there, or put it in an extra bag and then you'll put it in your backpack. But having some way that you can ensure that you don't leave the bag on the side and then say, I'm going to take it on my way out, and then you forget. And, it's not really nice. I see it so much on the trails. And so being responsible, thinking ahead, planning ahead. And remember that human waste can create disease, and it can ruin the water quality, or the water depending on where you are, and being mindful of that. So let's see. I'm going to see some of your comments so far. And Gustavo says, that our kids learn from parents. So let's, teach our kids to do the same, be responsible and caring for nature. Hey, Graham, nice to see you all. So that's leave no trace principle number 4. And number 5 is leave what you find, right? And that includes plants, rocks, artifacts, not bringing in non-native species of plants, and that sort of activity. So, I know when we're outside, sometimes you might find like rocks and, I recently was on a hike with someone and they were like pulling leaves, and I brought it to their awareness kindly, and just said, like if everyone kept doing that, what's going to happen after, maybe a couple years? You're going to go back and the rocks are going to be gone, and, the bushes are going to be damaged. So sometimes it's just unconscious behavior. And so I don't recommend that, you take anything. So leave it as there's this great saying, like take only pictures, leave only footprints. So practicing that. And, principle number 6 is minimize. Actually, I'm sorry, you guys, we are on principle number 5. So minimize campfire impacts. So, it's really important that before you go out into the backcountry that you double check the fire permit needs. and if you're even able to have a fire. So there's a place, I believe, in the LA forest, and you may not have fires, but I think you can get a permit. You need a permit for a stove, and then they make you go through a class. So you can't just go out there and be like, oh, I'm going to create a fire. So you always need to, that goes back to step one, right? Planning ahead and preparing. So just making sure that you double check. And then if you're allowed to have a fire, and if they have fire rings, making sure to use the established, pits, etc. If you are able to have a fire, keep the fire small, make sure that you only use, sticks that are small nearby, that you're not breaking plants and tree, trunks, etc. And then make sure to put out the fire completely before you go to bed. This is how forest fires start. For the most part, I've actually myself personally never created a fire on my own. I just don't want that liability and responsibility. It's just something that I don't like doing. But again, it's up to you. Just be respectful and responsible. And they do recommend, when you're going to cook, to use something like a jet boil. So, hey, Jeff and Quincy. Hey, guys. So leave no trace principle number 6 is to respect the wildlife. Remember not to disturb the wildlife. Do not feed. That's a huge problem in different national parks, and why bears come to campgrounds, etc. So you really, really, really want to make sure when you're in the backcountry, a lot of different trails, depending on where you are, require you to carry bear canisters and things of that sort to minimize bears coming into your campsite. And then, they say, there's the saying, a fed bear is a dead bear. So please be mindful of that. Enjoying wildlife at a distance. I know you guys have seen different reports of animals like attacking, people in national parks like Yellowstone. Again, people forget, that you need to watch at a distance. So be mindful of that. Making sure, again, to store your food securely and double check on the permits. And then another key thing that I think is super, super important is keeping our pets under control. It's kind of a problem because you don't know how your pet is going to react to another dog, or the other dog is going to react to your pet. So as much as you trust your pet, you don't know what other animals are capable of. So please be mindful when you bring your pets out and keep them under control. And again, if there's a bear in the area and your pet goes chasing after it, I mean, it's not a good, it's not a good practice if you really think about the implications of that and the message that you're giving. So I would highly recommend that, just remind yourself of respecting the wildlife, give wildlife its space, and then also prepare yourself, educate yourself. If you come across certain animals, what do I do, right? And we talked about that last week in safety, or 2 weeks ago in safety. And again, that goes back to plan ahead and prepare. Know where you're traveling, know what kind of flora and fauna and animals are out there, so that you're properly prepared and equipped with the education you need in case you encounter an animal. So I told this story that when I was on the John Muir Trail on day 3, we had a bear in our camp about 20 feet from my camp, my tent. And so I remembered in that moment, what do I do? Make myself look big. So I quickly grabbed my trekking poles and I yelled at the bear, and it ran, and it was with another bear. And so, it's like that quick thinking. I knew before I went out on the JMT that there was I thought a very slight chance I would run into animals, but it happened. So be very mindful of that and do your part. So the other thing, and this is a leave no trace principle number 7, is being considerate of other visitors. I will say that I think it's really sad when I'm on the trails and someone's got their boombox going. And I think a lot of times it's the younger generation, and you kind of have to have this attitude, like, do I say something? Do I not? A lot of times it's almost better not to, because it's like you don't want to start problems. But there are ways, and I talked to Casey, Modern Hiker, about this a couple, years ago. And he was like, the way you could approach it is you could say, hey, they fine for that. He talked about like dogs being on trails when they're not allowed on trails, and just saying, hey, there was a ranger back there and they fine for that. There's ways of doing it. It's all about the delivery. So remember, it's all about education. It's all about delivery. And then being mindful again, like people are out here to get away from the noise. People are here to disconnect. And so if I have my music playing loud, like that's going to impact someone else's experience. So putting in those headphones, we were sponsored by Aftershock. So they have these great headphones, which I'll show you actually. They're not a sponsor now, but they were really great, and I'll show them to you. These headphones actually allow you to hear ambient noise because they go right over. They don't go in your ears. They go right over, so I could hear everything. So, investing in something like this, or if you're going to have earphones in, having one earphone in and maybe not having, both of them in is a really great practice, because you need to be able to hear what's going on the trails. There might be mountain bikers zooming by you, or again, animals. And so being aware is another practice that I think really goes hand in hand with practicing mindfulness. So let's, if you have any comments, please add them in now. I'm going to take a quick sip of water. Take a sip for yourself. And we're going to get ready to talk a little bit about what is the right of way, right? Like when you're on the trails, so many times people get upset if and things happen, right? Like you might forget, but it's just a good reminder of who has the right of way. So bikers are supposed to yield to hikers. The person going uphill has the right of way. So if you're going downhill, it's easier for you to stop and step to the side and let the uphill hiker go. It is harder for them. And so just being mindful, and sometimes they're going to let you go. They're just going to step aside and they're going to just be like, no, go for it. So just practicing these little things is really, really key, to having a positive experience. And most hikers are pretty awesome anyway, so you'll just give us a better name. And then hikers should yield to horses and mules, etc. So remember, they get spooked. And I did the hike. I did the Machu Picchu hike last year, and I remember there were tons of mules on this trail. I was on the Salcantay trail. And I mean, sometimes the mules were unattended and they literally almost throw you off the side of the cliff. So make sure you actually get closer to the mountainside, and being mindful, step away, because you don't want to get yourself in a situation where you can get hurt. And again, they're animals. So yield to horses and mules. And also, if you're in a group, especially hosting group hikes, allow others to pass you, and, kind of stick to one side of the trail. And don't forget the buddy system of letting each other know if something's coming up that needs, attention, etc. So, and also if you're going in a group, making sure that you double check the regulations for the area you're in. Because I know when I led a hike in Washington, they didn't allow more than, I think it was 12 people in the group. So being mindful of that. So double checking, we actually just finished our leadership training, and we may launch that for individuals in the future. Right now, it's only 52 Hike Challenge leaders. We're going to perfect that training, and then we may launch that for anyone who might be interested in leading hikes in the future, just for in general. So that's one of the things we talk about, is just making sure you always check your permitting. Same with planning ahead. So we've talked about backcountry leave no trace. We've talked about the right of way, who has the right of way. Let's talk about the front country leave no trace principles. And again, they're kind of the same as the backcountry, but just a little bit different. Know before you go. Okay, that's again, calling the ranger's office, finding out if you need a permit. Just the more you know, the better you are going to be prepared for anything in case of an emergency, to make sure that you have looked at the weather and you have everything that you're carrying. So let's see. So again, we were talked about traveling in small groups, especially like if you're on your own. Traveling in smaller groups under 6 is what's recommended. Knowing the regulations, making sure, again, to highly recommended to use a map and compass. Again, we can't always, like our phones, we can't depend on our phones because our phone can die, it can fall, etc. So please always have a backup plan, have a map inside of a Ziploc bag, and familiarize yourself before you go out on the trail. They really don't like the use of cairns, and those are where the rocks are stacked. So that's why they highly recommend, you're taking rocks and moving them, and so that's why they also recommend you're in the know with where you're going beforehand. Repackaging your food into reusable containers, and especially now, we're kind of being forced to question how we do things, right? And so maybe it is deciding to go and bulk buy your snacks, and then maybe you have reusable, Ziploc baggies. There's been times where I have like a Ziploc bag that I use for my nuts and trail mix, etc. And so when I'm done with it, I just dump the little remains out and I reuse it. And so being mindful of that is really, really great, not only for you, but for the environment. And then, being prepared for the weather. Like I said, I highly recommend that in your day pack, you always carry a rainproof, waterproof jacket. And that's for various reasons, for rain and also wind proof. Okay. So, and always double checking the weather before you go out. So important. The mountains are always going to be there. Your life is more important. In one of the classes, and you can look it up on YouTube, I actually talked about how every time you go up 1,000 feet, it gets colder and colder, and how the wind chill can really affect what kind of a trip you have, and how enjoyable that's going to be. So, hi, Ava. She said, excited to do the training and get people out here in Washington when it's safe. Yeah, I mean, I'm super grateful to you guys. Thank you so much. For Ava's a leader here in Washington. So, and she actually started the group. So, knowing before you go, the other principle is stick to trails and camp overnight right. And again, I just talked about that, right? Like, unless you're working on something like the Sierra Club, the peaks, try to stay on trail. And if you do need to walk off trail, then making sure that you guys, if you have a group, that, you don't create a trail by going one after another behind each other, but rather disperse. They recommend walking in the middle of trails when possible, and that's probably just to keep that as the designated trail, not cutting switchbacks. So I actually do hear a lot of negative feedback from people who cut trails, switchbacks, right? That's when, you see the mountain do this and people think, oh, I'll just go straight up. And, again, you're creating use trails. And so that causes erosion and not a good idea. So please, please, please stick to the maintained trails. And, and then there is, let's see what else they say, again, when in the backcountry, picking durable surfaces, that includes, being able to camp on top of already established campgrounds. And then they talk about like not creating campgrounds, rather finding them. So when you're in the backcountry, when I did the John Muir Trail, you could easily see where the designated campsites were and where people had already camped. So I wasn't going and creating a new camp spot on top of like a meadow. By the way, meadows don't ever camp on a meadow, because you're destroying the habitat. And let's see what else we've got. So with that, camping right includes camping 200 feet away from lakes and streams. Because again, remember, we don't want to have our trash and our waste go into that water drinking source that's not only for ourselves, but for animals, okay? And that could cause illness, etc. So being mindful of that. The next front country leave no trace principle is, trash your trash and pick up your poop, aka pack it in, pack it out. Remember, I think I've talked about this so many times. If you are out on the trails and you dump your apple core or your orange peels and people see that, they think, oh, it's going to, it's biodegradable. Yeah, it is, but it takes a long time and it looks like trash. And then other people think, oh, I can do it as well. So, please pack it out. Just, if you have some way that you recycle at home, go for that instead. And, I bring a trash bag. As I mentioned, this is a part of my trash bag. I can put all my trash in this little baggie that I have in that bag, and just make sure that way stuff doesn't get sticky in my backpack, etc. So planning ahead. If you do go to the potty again, a 6 to 8 inch deep cat hole, 200 feet away from water, camp, and trails is what they recommend. Don't forget to cover your hole, pack out your toilet paper, and then, okay, let's talk about washing your dishes, same thing, do it 200 feet from water sources. And if you're going to use soap, make sure it's biodegradable and that you're not dumping big chunks of food. Actually, I took the Sierra Club Wilderness Travel course, and they talked about how when, let's say, the backcountry meals that are in the bags, the MREs, try to test those out before you go and make sure you like it, because, you're not supposed to dig a hole and then dump your food, because guess what? Then the animals might come out and start eating that food. And then same thing. Now they're going to be looking for food when other campers and hikers come in. So, if you have a bag of food that you don't like, I'm sorry, you're going to have to pack it out with you. And they drilled that into us. So, if you're going to start doing a lot more backcountry and backpacking, make sure you test out the food at home before you go, that you actually like it, because otherwise you do need to carry it out and it's going to be heavy. And as I mentioned, when I did the John Muir Trail, we were packing out, so our backpacks were really heavy on day 1, and day 7, they were a lot lighter because we'd eaten all our food and all of that. But we also had all the trash from that. And so what I did is I tried minimizing the amount of trash that I had to carry. And so that's why they recommend trying to pre-package things into smaller containers, etc. So think ahead. So let's talk about, let's see, Nadia says, did I ever write an article about my time on the John Muir Trail? She said she thinks she's going to go next year. And actually, Nadia, I never did because it was traumatizing, and I'll just talk to you guys about it real quick. I love backpacking. That being said, I don't think I'm a thru hiker. It is grueling mentally, emotionally, physically. There were days where I was just exhausted. I mean, it's actually, let me show you this. I'm going to take a quick pause. My girlfriend, my best friend that I did it with, got me this little medal. 211 miles with 47,000 feet of elevation gain. I mean, that's grueling, day in and day out. And you're having to break down your camp. And then you're having every single day, breaking it down, putting it up, breaking it down. Your hands are shredded. I think it's something that I would really recommend people do in sections. I would have much rather have done 7-day sections and really kind of taken my time and taken it all in, where I felt like we were constantly on a grind every single day to meet our miles. And then there were days where we had to get to a certain predetermined location to get our food. And so, sometimes we had weather issues, and it was exhausting. And I just was over it by week 2. And so I did it, I completed it, but I just don't think it's for everyone. So I would say, go for it, do it. If you really, really feel called to, you'll never know. And you can always decide, maybe if you don't like it, you can exit at a different, place or have those kinds of plans. But yeah, it's going to test you everything you've got. It really will, including, if you go with a partner, there's that other thing that you have to deal with when you're hiking with someone else and being mindful. Hey, Philip said, laughing out loud at testing MREs out before you go. Hey, but it's a great idea, right? So Nadia says she has tested all the meals she takes on long hikes. She refuses stuff to go to waste, but let's see. But she was terrified on her first through hike and would end up starving. And then Ricardo, hi, that's my dream to do the JMT. Yeah, maybe next year I'll do a JMT tutorial because I do think it is a lot of people's dreams, like it was for me. But you won't really know until you're out there. And so I think one of the things I would recommend, yeah, you're welcome, Chris. I'm super honest of my feelings. I'm never going to sugarcoat things. And that's why I couldn't get behind telling people, oh my gosh, you got to go do the JMT. Because honestly, I don't think that I want people to go out there and have that same experience. I really want people to enjoy the outdoors and to make a decision based off of what they feel versus what I'm telling them to do as a leader of an organization. I don't want people to have that kind of pressure that they have to go do this to be a hiker or to, prove something. So, let's see. Nadia says she's done some small through hikes, the longest being 7 days, but she never did 100% camping. She's always been in cabins. So oh no, don't be scared. Backpacking is amazing. I actually highly love backpacking, and I go, 3 days. I think the trail to Salcante in Peru was like 6 days, I want to say. So no, it's not that. It's the ongoing 21 days on the trail is a lot, so 7 days, you're good. And then Philip says, Nadia, I understand, spent 20 years in the military eating MREs. I get it. Just found it humorous. Love it. So, thank you for your service, Philip. And Ricardo, I highly recommend if you want to do through hiking, please go do sections of it. It would be so enjoyable. And then you know what to expect. And then look, it's like anything in life, right? The more we have something, the less we appreciate it. So after a while, all the meadows to me look the same and all the peaks look the same. So I think if I would have done a week at a time, I would have been like, oh my gosh, like this is so awesome, So, okay, you guys, let's get back to the leave no trace part of this. So after you make sure you pick up your trash, all of that, we talked about this, leave it as you found it, right? Like, please, leave nature as is. Don't disturb the animals. Don't pick the flowers. Don't leave the rocks where they are. All of that. So, just be mindful of that. And the next one is being careful with fire. Again, it would be horrible if you're out on a trail and you started a fire and it burned down the forest, right? Like that is I think someone's worst nightmare. So if you're gonna start a fire and you're able to, please know how to put it out, before you go to bed, and know what to do, know how to start a fire properly, educate yourself, learn how to create a fire. And again, in my personal opinion, I'd rather not even go there. I don't want to deal with that liability personally. So, and then lastly, again, keeping wildlife wild, just leave the wildlife alone. Most of the time, it doesn't want anything to do with you anyway. Know what to do in case you encounter these animals. We talked about this in Safety 101 the other day when we had one of these classes. So I want to ask you guys, can you tell me some examples of human created impacts that you've seen when you're out on the trails? I just want to read them out and see what you guys have seen when you're out there. And I'll read some of your comments. Mary said she plans to do the PCT in sections starting section 8 in March for her 50th birthday. Congratulations, Mary. That is awesome. And I am all for that. And I'm excited to hear that you're in your 50s. Connie, my partner, is also in her 50s, and she was an amazing person to do the John Muir Trail with. And, I was just so blown away by her, determination, and age has nothing to do with it. It's all mind. It's all mind training. And that's why 52 really can help to prepare you mentally for these challenges, not only on the trails, off the trails, right? Like right now, we're all having to just be in surrender. We're all having to trust the process and, finding that stillness within ourselves. So, Philip says he finds it really irritating that people leave their doggy waste in their dog's waste in a baggie and then leave the baggie on the trail. It's really frustrating for not only you, it's for everyone, and again, the only things we can do is educate. I know, actually, I've seen a doggy product. It's like a vest for the dog, and I think it had a spot where you could put the dog poop in. Or again, there are things you can do, like carrying a waste bag and putting the dog poop in there. And sorry, you're going to bring your dog out. Please be mindful. And let's see what else we have. Tammy says she also sees them on the trail all the time. Ava says sometimes she sees teepee behind trees on some trails here. She reps the kula cloth due to this. Okay, ladies, let's talk for one moment. So yes, I talked about when you go to the restroom. Let me show you again for those of you that didn't see it. This is my toilet bag. So what I do, and this is for any trail I go on, trowel so I can dig my 6-inch hole. This one's, by the way, this one's a super lightweight one. It weighs nothing. It's actually ultra lightweight. Here's my toilet paper, and I always bring this trash bag so that I can put my toilet paper in here. So please just don't think you can go out there and just start leaving your trash everywhere. It's just really sad. And let's see, the kula cloth. Okay, let's talk about that real quick. So there's 2 things you can do as a female and male. If you want to, use it, go for it. So I've heard you can use a bandana, and women tend to cut the bandana and they go restroom, number 1, and they wipe themselves and then they hang it, and the sunlight disinfects the cloth. I cannot be held responsible whether that's true or not. It's up to you. But I do know a lot of women do that. And then there's this kula cloth, which is essentially the same thing. It's a cloth that you can fold and put on your pack and use it when you go to the restroom. And that way you're not creating extra waste. Okay? So let's see what other tips we've got here. So Christina, she says, great tips. I see trash on my day hikes all the time. People, very sad, carry out other people's trash out. Yeah, I mean, being a trail steward means sometimes we are the bigger person, okay? Being a leader sometimes means you sacrifice for others. So yes, there are going to be times where we have to be the bigger person and we pack out other people's things, okay? So if you can, they call it the 8th essential, bring a trash bag with you and, just do your part. Again, we're all trying to enjoy the trails. At the end of the day, if no one did anything, the trails would probably be a disaster. So, that's going to come with this responsibility of enjoying the trails. Stacy says, picking wildflowers on the trail and then getting sick of carrying them and leaving them on the side of the trail. That is she says that in dog poop bags. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the hardest things was a couple years ago, there was this super bloom here in California, and there were tons of people going out in the field and all of that. And so, if you have your own flowers at home and you build yourself like a wall of flowers and you want to go like jump in them, go for it. It's in your backyard. But, when there's a super bloom going on, I don't think you should be going out into the flowers. Not only are you now encouraging others to do it, but, it just creates issues. Now, I'm not perfect. I'm not saying that I've never walked off trail and looked at something. But, then I learned oh, that's going to create a problem, right, for someone else, because now they're seeing me go off trail to look at the flowers. Whether I wasn't doing anything wrong, I was going off trail because I saw a big, field of flowers. It's like you learn and you don't do it again. That's my advice there, right? But yeah, remember, everything you do, you're being an example to others. So yeah, picking them. I never picked wildflowers before. If they're not in your house, I would just say leave it, let it be. Other people need to be able to enjoy it. So, no one's perfect, you guys. I'm going to be completely honest with you guys and say, yeah, I've made mistakes before, but the only way to do better is to learn and to understand that with being outdoors, we have to practice responsibility and learn, okay? So Mary says she's on her 4th year of the 52 Hike Challenge. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Mary, for supporting it. And Mary says, she gets irritated with, the trash. I think most people do. And thank you, Philip, again, for carrying trash bags with you on every hike. And yeah, I mean, they do get really stinky. I agree. So, what we've done, what I've seen people do on our hikes when we've done 52 Hike Challenge hikes is, what we do is we go to our end point, and on the way down, that's when people pick up the trash, not on the way there. So that way, they can enjoy their hike there. And then on the way down, they can bring the trash, and then, they don't have to be surrounded with the scent for the whole hike. And Mary says she brings gloves too. I think that's a great idea. Bring reusable gloves out there so that when you are deciding to pick up trash, you're not touching things that might be dirty, etc. And I've seen other people bring not only the biodegradable trash bags, but also like the picks so that they can, pick the trash with those, the trash pickers. So, let's see. We've got a couple more. Oh, yeah. See, Philip said he had someone throw a bottle before, and he actually picked it up and let the guy know he'd carry it out for him. And again, it's all in delivery, and just being like, hey, that really wasn't, cool. And again, you don't have to do that. I actually kind of think you got to be really careful with people these days. But again, there are ways of approaching someone or educating someone. And like I said, I recently went on a hike with someone who was grabbing like leaves, and I kind of brought it to their awareness like, hey, I'm not going to be able to hike with you anymore if you keep picking leaves. And I kind of made it a joke, you see. So they kind of laughed, and they were like, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize it. It was a subconscious thing. And, it's like, that's the thing, we're all human. We all make mistakes. Let's learn. Let's do better next time. So perfect. Mary, thank you. We've all made mistakes and learned from them. Absolutely. That's what life is all about, right, guys? It's like life is all about just we're here to learn, and we don't need to take everything so serious, but we should think about what we do before we do it. And again, we're not perfect. It's things may happen sometimes, and we realize after the fact, maybe that wasn't a good idea, and just try better next time. So, before we go, thank you so much for, including your examples. Other things that, the Leave No Trace talked about was just, some things people do is, visitor created trails, social trails, forest fires, wildlife that comes out and starts eating food like squirrels. People think it's funny and cute to give them food, but it's just really not a good idea. Conflicts between user groups, and that's tough, because I think, I've seen and I've heard of that, but, we're all human beings, and like trying to empathize, like we're all here trying to enjoy the outdoors and just, being kind, it's something that we need to work on a daily basis. So just being kind to one another. You might see someone that you think, oh, I have an assumption, or, there's just a lot of negativity in the world sometimes. And so just be mindful, Vandalized sites, contaminated lakes and streams, names carved in trees. And, I'm sure there's been people who, in the past when they were younger, they did something like that. And you only acted from your own place of awareness at the time, you know? And so, yeah, you know, like get educated and learn more and do better next time. And the last thing I'm going to say is, you know, if you want to learn more, go on to lnt.org. They have a free awareness course, which you can take, and they'll, you know, run you through the video. It takes about half an hour to an hour. They do a test and you can get a certificate at the end. I'll actually show it to you guys so that you can see what it looks like. We make our leaders take the class, and it's free. Let me show you. Just give me a sec. I'm going to turn this camera around for just a second. There it is. There's a certificate. Okay. And it's free. They have a kids leave no trace program, so you can teach your kids. And they have other things going on. They have events. You can host a class. I think it's a great organization. And I think it's really important to just practice, you know, protecting our spaces and doing our part to be stewards of the trails. And, you know, I think that right now, let's see, we have a couple of other comments. But yeah, just go on their website, check it out. I highly recommend that you take the free awareness course, especially right now, you know, take the time to educate yourself. And, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it for today. I think we touched on pretty much everything. We talked about music. We talked about, you know, trash, the kindness. And let's see, I'm just going to read some final things and final notes. And Richard said, some hikers get mad when you tell them not to leave their trash or their music is too loud. Yeah, I mean, and again, we talked about that. That's just that's a challenge. You know, I wish there was something we could do as a community. Maybe someone has a great idea, but I loved what Casey from Modern Hiker said. He was like, more like, hey, you could tell them that people get fined for what they're doing and that you're just letting them know. And remember, if you go at someone angry, like you're like, hey, your music is too loud, they're going to react exactly and meet you where you're at. But if you're like, hey, you know, I just wanted to let you know that like there's a ranger, like I saw him back there and they fined for that, you know, like you kind of make it like really quiet. I mean, that's one way. Or again, you don't say anything, but then how do we educate our family and friends? Maybe you do a post on social and talk about it. Maybe you write an email to your friends. You can get creative. As a community, I think we're all going to be better together. So leave your comments right now and let me know what you guys recommend for how do we address this? You know, how do we educate others and how we do that together? So Christina said, yes, kindness goes a long way. And, you know, Mary says, please wear your masks when you are out on open trails. Again, follow your local state regulations, and it's not necessarily about you, it's about others. So being mindful about that. And Ava said, thanks. And Mary, you are so welcome. Thanks. And Heather, you are so welcome, you guys. That's pretty much it for me, unless you have any questions. Have a drink of water. Whoops, see, I drank too fast. So this will be up on YouTube as long as the video loads. My last class on Instagram Live, Instagram had a glitch and I was unable to load the video. So as long as it loads, it will be on YouTube, so you can share this with people. It'll be on Facebook, so you can share this with your friends. And don't forget, if you have not supported the 52 Hike Challenge and are able to, we have a fundraiser going on. We're trying to raise funds just to keep our team going. And I do have some great news. As of right now, we are able to continue operations with our team for at least another 2 months. So I'm so thankful to you guys who have supported. And if you want to send a donation, you can. I'll put the link in this video later, or you can buy something from the store, which helps to support us. You know, it's really, really how we keep these programs going. And the other thing I was going to say is we have a fundraiser, a shirt fundraiser. So I'll add add all of that into the video. And don't forget that tomorrow there's yoga. I don't remember what time. I'll have to double check, but there's yoga, and we're doing that because some of us can't get outside. So just maintain your, mindfulness practice right now. Take care of yourself. Do things that you love and enjoy. Read, meditate, light a candle, make yourself a beautiful dinner. This is so important right now. If we're not able to go onto the trails, self-care, 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 okay? So, love you guys so much. Gordon, thank you. Philip, thank you. Chris, thank you. Have an amazing rest of your evening, and I will see you on the trails soon enough. Bye.